Welcome to Breezin with Bierman, the podcast, part of the Princetonian Now and Now New Pod City Media Group. As always, our job is to educate, entertain, inform, and tell you, my people, what's trending. Please listen to Breezin with Bierman, the podcast on Apple, Spotify, iTunes, New Pod City, YouTube, and many more platforms. Today's guest is the author of Celibacy. See if we can get that here on the screen, a love story. Quick synopsis. The author grew up secure with family love and never questioned the unusual circumstances of being adopted by two women in the 1930s. It was years later before she learned the secret that one of the women was her grandmother and the other woman was in fact her biological mother, while the local priest who doted on her was her daddy. Please welcome Mimi Bowl of Celibacy, a love story, memoir of a Catholic priest's daughter. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So you bear a lot when you write this book. What do you want people to take away from it? What do you want them to know? I know it's...
I would love them to think about revising celibacy in the Catholic Church. I would like them to think about the depth charge, the explosive quality of secrets in their lives, no matter what it is. And I am really an advocate of writing as a way of healing. It was very important in my getting over years and years of depression.
Yeah, you write that. I mean, there's so many types of depression, but you always felt, even before you knew there was these secrets about who your mom was, who the priest was, you felt something was off and you were depressed and it stifled your creativity, your relationships.
Yes, that's true. My father died when I obviously did not know that he was my father. He died at the end of my freshman year at Smith College. And starting in the sophomore year, I began walking the floors at night. I was depressed. I was having trouble academically, and I didn't have any sense of what was going on. And that was obviously in 1955, early in the history of, Jung was still alive. Freud had just died.
Yeah, I met Anna Freud. She lived in Princeton for a while. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
exactly,
not that, yeah.
Exactly. Right. So it's primitive time for even knowing you could get help for something that you didn't really know what was going on. And any sense of mental issues was shaming. So you soldiered on, which is what I did. And because I had no idea of my mother's relationship with my father, other than he was a very close, supportive, old friend of the family. So I had no idea what she was going through as she was mourning the loss of, her beloved. And so I just got on with it.
Well, what are the? I mean, it's hard. Can you quantify in words? What do you feel, especially after you found out? I talked to a psychiatrist about that, and he says that betrayal of secrets from loved ones to like kids can be seen again as betrayal. It's confusing. It's hurtful. What does it leave a vacancy? Anger, the depression that debilitates you? What does it feel like?
Well, I didn't find out that my mother was my mother until I was 35. I was in Princeton. Right. I was married. My 3 children were growing up, and she came down and she told me. And of course,
right in the book, right?
Having been raised as an adopted child, my instinct was, oh my God, this woman I loved as my mother is my biological mother. Right. So it was the reversal. And when I asked her about my father, she said, oh, well, I never knew him. He never knew about your existence. It was a one-night stand. I was innocent. I was, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't ask anymore. She would shut down and that was it. So that gave me something to go on. I suddenly at 35 realized that I was somebody's child, that I really belonged in her family in which I grew up in.
Biologically,
her
right?
extended family. But there was still, the question of who my father was. And that I didn't find out until her death 15, 16 years later.
As you write so well in the book. Yeah. It's kind of like a novel, detective novel that you slowly, the story unwinds and stuff.
Yeah.
How did that hit you when you found out this man? And from what I read, you were Catholic, raised Catholic, you believed in the church, and this man was doting. He was like we would call him like an uncle back then.
Yeah.
He was
my, sorry, I lose words now. He was like a doting uncle. He was like I saw him all the time. He was part of my family. And that's the way it was. I accepted it as it was. Right. And when I discovered at the end, after my mother died, literally the afternoon she died, that he was my father, and that everybody knew except for me. Wow. And my mother's husband. My mother married after 7 years after my father died.
And they really kept it a secret. They really were able to do that.
She never told her husband for 20 years.
Is that because of repression? Is that because of just guilt? Is that just something the times?
It's the mystery. I've discussed it with so many of her friends and so forth. She was so deeply in the habit of keeping it a secret, afraid that I would be hurt by, being basically a bastard. I'm trying to upgrade that word because being a bastard is not your own doing, and yet you can't call yourself that. It's a very derogatory term, but that's what I am. And so it's a hard, it was, I've lost oh, there you are. Okay. So
I'm right here.
Yeah. Okay.
You can go. You're out of the camera a little bit, though.
Well,
there you go.
This is weird. You're on the big screen now.
Okay.
Okay. At any rate, I was again faced with utter delight that this person who had really been the only fatherly figure in my life was my real father.
So there was a positive from this.
That was positive. And as I came to understand their situation, I was born in the depth of the Depression. There was no way that at that time when men were, jumping out of windows because there was no work. And she had a good job. I mean, she owned her own hairdressing shop, so she had a regular income and could support me. There was no point in their picking up stakes and leaving town. So I always understood why they didn't marry, why they didn't provide.
It could have destroyed all their lives. You said, though, it thwarted his ambition. He might have wanted to go on to a bigger church. Yes. But he probably stayed because you were there.
No. I think just the opposite. I think he would have maintained a relationship, but he was a very charismatic, articulate, well-educated man, and he expected that promotion and had his bags packed to go.
He did.
Told, and he didn't get it, and they kept him in that little parish in this little town. He had about I don't know how many members, but he had a wider life. I mean, he got involved with bigger issues in Boston, and he was only 47, 48 when he died.
Right. Pretty young.
Yeah.
Let's jump though. So you get married though.
Yeah.
Still in the church. Yeah. Right out of college. That's what people did back then. My mom said if it was today, she would have waited till she was 30, but right out of college. And you had kids. Yeah. You're in the church. But you said it still affected your relationships this past.
No, I didn't think about it then because I didn't know. I was
that's right. We jump again. Right.
Yeah, I didn't know till long after that. We were in Turkey. I had 3 children. We were there for 6 years. I absolutely adored being there. I loved the city. I loved everything about living in Turkey, but I would have these intermittent bouts of depression. And a young psychotherapist was staying with us, someone my husband met on campus, and she and her husband came to stay with us, came to lunch and stayed 3 days. You know, that was the way it was. And at the end, she said, Mimi, I really, I hope you don't mind saying this, but you are depressed and it's taking.
They could see it right off.
She could see it. She just
funny.
hit it. And she said, you really must get help. And I tried. I went to a Turkish psychiatrist, a male, and I had no information. I didn't know why. Here I was happily married. I was loving Turkey. I had no reason to be like this. And my husband.
Well, how to articulate and advocate for yourself, what's going on inside you. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't know what to tell him. So I didn't go back to him. So it took me a number of years until really 1980.
Wow.
When I was living 80s, 90s, when I was living in Boston, that I finally got to a man named Tom Cottle, who is well known as a specialist on children's secrets. And even he couldn't wrap his head around a lot of it. He always advocated for me to get angry.
Anger therapy, right?
And I didn't feel it. I felt, thank God they chose to save me. They could have put me up for adoption. They could have done any number of things.
Right. But it still lurks in the psyche. It's weird how the mind works. If I can bring up though too, did you have you said you met a man on a train of color, or something, and what drew you to him? And would you call that's an affair, or you didn't see him that much, but over the years?
No, I mean, he was a wise man. He was he was 25 years older. He was a mentor. He was a cheerleader. He stuck with me. He believed in me. He urged me to write. He urged me to establish my own agenda in what was a very 50s match, marriage. I did what my children and my husband needed me to do.
Right. And you just found jobs that supplemented that before really looking for a job you wanted. I remember you said.
Exactly. Right. I had very good jobs, but, and indeed, I had a wonderful job at the Institute for Advanced Study with George Kennan, and that was.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. X.
Yeah. So that was, I was very fortunate. Right. So I had these two rivers. I had an extraordinarily interesting, happy life going on, and then this subterranean little eruptions that would happen over
from time to
years.
time.
Yeah.
That's a great metaphor, right? So you enjoyed everything.
I think that makes it clear. So around when I began to understand more about my background, after I found out who my father was, told to me by my mother's best friend, who was astonished that I didn't know. Nobody could believe that I hadn't known, but I didn't. I started keeping a journal, and that was really important. And I did Rogoff seminars, which are wonderful directed journals workshop. And that writing was really important. And then I went to Lesley University to get a master's in
Cambridge, Mass.
Yeah, in geriatric psychotherapy. And all the work I did there, all of my young classmates, I mean, I was in my 50s and my classmates were in their 30s and 20s. They kept saying, come on, Mimi, you got to speak up. In these group meetings, you can't observe. If you're going to be a good therapist, you've got to be able to speak up and, be your own. So they really pushed me out. And then finally, having been to a number of social workers, therapists, none of whom could wrap their head around until Tom Cottle, I kept resisting taking any medication because, again, that was not an art, that was not a science, it was a rough art. And
yeah, it was a wish, right? You just throw things together and see what works.
With psychopharmacy.
Tropics.
Yeah. And utterly, after I had done all this work and was working for the geriatric services at Cambridge Hospital, getting, as you can see, my respiratory system, a friend of mine, Holly, actually, sent me to a acupuncturist who was excellent.
That's what I found fascinating. You said it worked.
It worked. It worked within 3 weeks. It was like this terrific gray scrim lifted. Right. And I began to really experience things deeply. I wasn't sort of tamping down all my emotions. Right. And my poor husband, who was really good about accepting it all, was delighted. That's what he'd always wanted. I had become so, yes, I can do that. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. Right. And suddenly, I came into Technicolor, and he had always been there and loved it.
Acupuncture, yeah, we have to soon wrap it up, so we have to get to questions from the crowd. I talked to a doctor about this acupuncture, and he goes, the literature is there somewhat. They don't know why it works, but what the doctor said, psychiatrist doctor said, hey, if it works, whatever.
Yeah.
Voices from the crowd. You do mention, we go back to the book. You started this too because there was priests in the Amazon who wanted dispensation from celibacy, and Pope Francis recently said no. Is that another reason you wrote this book? Or that happened?
No. I started the book at least. I did a seminar at Radcliffe with Patricia Hampel. It was a wonderful 3-day thing that you had to, enter and be accepted. And that was in the year 2000. And that was when I began really working on it. But then I had to go through my husband's death,
prostate cancer, right?
Blah, blah, blah. So the book has been 20 years in the making.
Wow. Okay, this is Voices from the Crowd, people in Princeton. Yeah. You seemed that you had by trial and error, you had to fight to get your own help. What do you recommend to people, when they suffer from what you went through? What kind of, do you have to be tenacious? Do you have to know the right people, questions to ask, right people to go to? How do you research it? What do you do?
Oh, yeah, it was trial and error. I would ask people, you have to find somebody who you trust and who can understand you. And not every two human beings fit together. So it's worth looking around. But with Tom Cottle, it was just instantaneous. He was bright. He knew the impact on children of secrets. And it's really devastating. But I feel so strongly about writing. I feel strongly about expressing yourself, anybody, and particularly as you approach older age, it's a wonderful review of your life. Mm-hmm. And through the writing, I came to, you have to realize, I never knew my parents as, quote, my parents. They were my mother and a friend of the family, whom I saw a lot of, but I didn't see them together a great deal. So I never thought of them as a pair, as a couple, as people in love. And I had to put myself all into that. And I came to understand and to appreciate and be so grateful for what they did for me. Anyway, so that, and I also felt very strongly that we're the last group, children of priests have such a wide spectrum of stories. And so often, I mean, I was lucky. My father, even though he didn't tell me who he was, I think he would have in time. He loved me, you
Right.
know, unconditionally. He loved me. He was with me to the very end of his life.
And you said there's secret Vatican guidelines that deal with what priests who have kids. Is that true?
Yeah, supposedly. And that's only, you know, I wrote that letter to the Pope before the meeting in Switzerland. And I don't think the Pope ever saw it, but it was a plea outlining, you know, my situation and the fact that so many others have been outright rejected by their priest fathers, or just held at a distance, or, you know, never know until it's too late. I mean, my friend who exhumed his body,
Wow.
his father's body, to do DNA tests, because the order that his father belonged to refused him any information, and he proved it.
Well, we're going to have to end with that. We're running out, but it's a fascinating book. It's a journey. It's complicated. It's touching. Some happy ending. It's Mimi Boll, Celibacy, a memoir of a Catholic priest daughter. This has been Breezin with Bierman, the podcast. Thanks a lot, Mimi Boll, and maybe we'll talk to you again.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Oh, okay.
Adam.
Call me anything.
I'm apt to.
Okay.